Staff Sergeant Kestrel Thorne heard the base commander dismiss her with those exact words. "You're just a girl playing soldier in a man's war." What he didn't know was that this former ranch kid from Wyoming had spent 4 years as an Army explosive ordnance disposal specialist, and in the next 18 hours, her steady hands would be the only thing standing between a crowded elementary school and a device that could level 3 city blocks. 28-year-old Kestrel Thorne stood in the maintenance bay of Fort Carson's EOD unit, methodically cleaning her specialized tools with the same precision she'd once used to repair windmill gears on her family's Wyoming ranch. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her weathered hands as she organized her disruptor equipment and protective gear. If you're drawn to stories about the real heroes who serve our country with quiet dignity, subscribe for more Untold. Veteran stories that need to be heard. Around her, fellow soldiers moved with the controlled urgency that defined life on an active military installation. Kestrel had earned her place here through 4 years of explosive ordnance disposal work, becoming one of fewer than 200 female EOD specialists in the entire Army. Her service record showed 17 successful IED disarmaments during her deployment in Afghanistan, but the numbers never captured the weight of each moment, when a single wrong movement could mean the difference between soldiers coming home and flag-draped coffins. The maintenance bay smelled of gun oil and metal, polish, familiar scents that reminded her of the workshop, where her grandfather had taught her to work with her hands before she ever knew what military service would demand of her. Kestrel's exceptional abilities traced back to her childhood on the Thorne family ranch, where her grandfather, a Korean War veteran and former demolitions expert, had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7. He'd taught her that steady hands could mean the difference between life and death, whether you were delivering a breached calf or diffusing unexploded ordnance left from old mining operations on their land. Her grandfather, Sergeant First Class Wade Thorne, had instilled in her a deep respect for precision work and an understanding that some jobs couldn't tolerate even the smallest mistake. He'd shown her how to read the subtle signs that indicated structural weakness in machinery, how to feel the difference between components through thick gloves, and most importantly, how to remain calm when everything around you suggested panic, was the only reasonable response. When she enlisted at 19, Kestrel carried with her grandfather's final words, "Every life you save honors every life that came before." Her military service became her way of continuing his legacy of service, even as she faced constant questions about whether someone her size and gender could handle the physical and psychological demands of explosive ordnance disposal. Her core motivation remained simple but profound, ensuring that other families never had to experience the sudden, devastating loss that had shaped her childhood, and proving that competence had nothing to do with preconceptions about who looked the part of a soldier. The conflict began during a joint training exercise with local emergency responders when a suspicious device was discovered near Riverside Elementary School. The device appeared to be a sophisticated improvised explosive with enough destructive power to collapse the school's main building and damage surrounding structures within a 3-block radius. Colonel Marcus Brennan, the base commander, immediately dismissed Kestrel's assessment that the device showed signs of being deliberately placed to maximize casualties during the afternoon dismissal period. He told the assembled emergency response team that they needed someone with real experience for this situation, not a specialist who looked like she should be teaching kindergarten instead of handling explosives. When Kestrel suggested that the device's placement and timing indicated someone with intimate knowledge of the school's daily routines, Brennan cut her off and called for a male EOD specialist from Fort Hood to take over the operation. The local fire chief openly questioned whether the Army was sending their best people, remarking that this situation called for someone who could handle the pressure. The professional skepticism extended to her tactical recommendations. Kestrel had identified that the device included anti-handling features designed to trigger, if approached using conventional EOD protocols. Her suggestion to use a modified approach that accounted for these features was dismissed as overthinking from someone trying to prove herself. As the afternoon dismissal time approached and the Fort Hood specialist remained hours away due to equipment transport delays, Brennan made it clear that he would rather evacuate the entire neighborhood and wait for proper expertise than trust what he called an inexperienced soldier with a dangerous situation. The systematic dismissal of her professional assessment created a cascade of poor decisions. Emergency responders began implementing a partial evacuation that would actually move children closer to the blast radius, while school administrators insisted they couldn't hold children past dismissal time without triggering panic among parents, who would rush toward the school. Alone in the equipment staging area, Kestrel felt the familiar weight of doubt that had followed her throughout her military career. She'd proven herself 17 times in Afghanistan, but here on American soil, her competence was questioned before she'd even begun working. The dismissal cut deeper because it echoed every moment of her childhood when ranch hands had assumed. The orphaned girl couldn't handle the physical demands of farm work. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. They'll judge your cover before they read your pages, but the work doesn't care what you look like. She thought about the children inside Riverside Elementary, probably sitting in their classrooms, working on math problems or listening to stories, unaware that adults outside were making decisions that could determine whether they went home to their families that evening. The weight of that responsibility had nothing to do with rank or gender, and everything to do with the technical skills she'd spent years developing. Kestrel examined her hands, noting the small scars from countless hours of precision work. These same hands had successfully disarmed devices that had killed other soldiers, had maintained equipment in conditions that challenged every aspect of human endurance, and had folded flags for families who would never see their loved ones again. The emotional response crystallized into a simple recognition. She could walk away and let someone else handle the criticism when the situation went wrong. Or she could accept that doing the right thing sometimes meant being insubordinate. As the afternoon progressed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The Fort Hood specialist's helicopter encountered mechanical problems, extending his arrival time by another 4 hours. School administrators, under pressure from increasingly anxious parents gathering outside the safety perimeter, announced they would begin dismissal procedures in 30 minutes, regardless of the ongoing situation. Colonel Brennan's insistence on following standard protocol created exactly the scenario Kestrel had warned against. The device's anti-handling features included a secondary trigger designed to activate when it detected the electromagnetic signatures from conventional EOD equipment being positioned for a standard approach. Local emergency responders, lacking experience with sophisticated explosive devices, began implementing evacuation procedures that would funnel children directly through the area Kestrel had identified as the maximum casualty zone. When she attempted to explain this tactical error, she was ordered to remain with the equipment staging area and await further instructions. The environmental pressure intensified when local news crews arrived and began broadcasting live coverage, attracting more civilian vehicles to the area and making evacuation increasingly difficult. Parents, seeing the military presence but not understanding the nature of the threat, began approaching the safety perimeter, demanding information about their children. Kestrel watched through binoculars as school custodians unknowingly triggered the device's motion sensors while attempting to secure the building. The LED display on her detection equipment showed that the anti-handling system had activated, meaning any conventional approach would now result in immediate detonation. With 15 minutes until the scheduled dismissal and no authorization to act, she faced the choice between following orders that would likely result in casualties and taking unauthorized action that would end her military career but might save lives. Without authorization and facing certain court-martial, Kestrel grabbed her disruptor kit and approached the device using the modified technique she'd developed during her third deployment. Her grandfather's training guided every movement as she identified the specific vulnerability in the device's design that conventional protocols couldn't address. The anti-handling system had been configured to respond to standard EOD approaches, but the bomb maker had overlooked the possibility that someone might recognize the device's construction as similar to mining explosives used in Wyoming's coal country. Kestrel's ranch background allowed her to identify that the primary charge was connected through a modified mining detonator that could be safely interrupted using a technique her grandfather had learned during Korean War demolitions work. Working with surgical precision, she bypassed the anti-handling triggers by accessing the device through an approach angle that avoided the motion sensors. Her steady hands, developed through years of delicate ranch work and refined through military training, allowed her to disconnect the primary circuit without triggering the backup systems. The technical mastery required to disarm the device in under 8 minutes, while working around multiple anti-handling features, demonstrated why she'd survived 4 years of EOD work in combat zones. Every movement was calculated, every decision based on hard-earned expertise rather than standard procedures. When the device's LED display went dark, indicating successful disarmament, Colonel Brennan arrived to find Kestrel carefully documenting the bomb's construction for intelligence purposes. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of children playing in the distance, unaware that their afternoon had been preserved by someone whose competence had been systematically questioned and dismissed. The investigation that followed revealed the device had been placed by a former military contractor with intimate knowledge of both standard EOD procedures and the school's daily routines. Kestrel's unauthorized action had not only prevented casualties, but had also preserved evidence that led to the bomber's capture within 72 hours. Colonel Brennan's formal reprimand for insubordination was quietly withdrawn when the Army's EOD command reviewed her tactical innovation and requested detailed documentation for training purposes. The technique she'd developed became part of the curriculum for handling anti-handling devices, with proper credit given to Staff Sergeant Thorne's battlefield adaptations. More significantly, her actions catalyzed changes in how military leadership evaluated technical competence versus conventional assumptions. The incident became a case study in military leadership courses, focusing on the cost of dismissing expertise based on demographic preconceptions rather than demonstrated capability. 6 months later, Kestrel received orders for promotion to Sergeant First Class and assignment as an EOD instructor, where her job became teaching others to recognize that technical excellence could emerge from unexpected backgrounds, and that the most dangerous assumption in military operations was believing competence had a specific appearance. The flag that had been prepared for Riverside Elementary's memorial service was instead folded and presented to Kestrel, each of its 13 creases representing the promise that every life has value, and some promises can only be kept by those willing to act when action requires courage rather than permission.